Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, the MLB playoffs, the NHL, the NBA, to political props. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today, and keep an eye out for State of State apparel coming soon. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Joining me today on State of State, he is now retired Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall. If you haven't seen his content on social media, you've got to check him out on X and Instagram. His film breakdowns are amazing. But if you go to his YouTube channel at Behind the Wall 58, which you can check out the link to it in the description of this podcast, Landon does a phenomenal job highlighting Penn State's football players, past and present, and giving game breakdowns, recaps, previews, everything you can imagine. We've had you on the show, Landon, from the first kind of months after you announced your retirement from a medical standpoint, and we've had you back on since. And I'm just so impressed by everything that you've built, and now you're doing something that's greater than yourself. And a lot of people may have seen this on social media. You've actually spearheaded starting an NIL fundraiser for someone who now Penn State fans love, place kicker, walk-on freshman place kicker Ryan Barker. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you having me on, man. So it originated after the USC game. I do live. So if you want to check it out at Behind the Wall with Landon Tengwall on YouTube, I do lives directly after the game ends. And people were coming in, I'm guessing, very drunk. Also, their heart was beating 120 beats per minute, that type of thing. Yeah. And people were saying, "Hey, how can I donate to Ryan Barker?" And I'm like, "Okay, that's a good idea. There's definitely no direct way to do that right now." And I'm like, that's an interesting concept. So I thought about it. And I was like, okay, what if I have him on my podcast, number one, so the fans can get to know him, who he is off the field. That's kind of the whole premise of why I started Behind the Wall, was to introduce the fans to past, present, whatever, who people actually are. Because you just see them on the field. You see what they do. You don't see anything else of who they actually are. So I wanted to have him on for that. And then I was like, I think I could tie in a donation thing to that, because I knew there's still rules. You can't just directly give money to someone. So I'm like, hey, if I raise the money and then use 100%, by the way, 100% of the money donated does go to Ryan. So doesn't matter if we raise $30,000, he's getting paid $30,000 for an interview appearance. So I decided to work with Penn State compliance, make sure everything was above board. And I am going to basically use all the money to pay him as an NIL event. It's going really well right now. We are getting a ton of support from all of Nittany Nation. So it's been really cool to see. I believe we have had 88 people so far donate, and it's been up for about 16 hours right now, 17 hours. So it has been real as we recorded, as we're sitting here right now. And so it's been awesome, man, just to see the support of Nittany Nation and what it really means. I felt that support when I had to retire, that type of thing. And now we are able to support someone who is a hero after Penn State USC. And I think, just talking ball, we need a place kicker, Tom. I mean, we going into Ohio State and even USC, imagine if we would have left, and we said it when we were playing UCLA, when we were playing those other teams, when Sander missed a couple kicks, it was like, dude, we can leave those points on the board right now, but we cannot leave those points out there when we play USC, Ohio State. And if Ryan would have missed any of those kicks, we're not going to overtime. So as much as people could say, hey, it's a 35-yarder, 40-yarder, well, no one else on the team was making them. So thank God for Ryan Barker. And this is a way to kind of show your support. And I think on a lower level where it's just, not necessarily this overall huge thing of just donating to NIL. You know exactly where it's going. You're donating to the place kicker. And then not to mention, he's a walk-on. He is still paying his way for class. And people ask, hey, why can't Ryan Barker just get put on scholarship? Take the other kicker off, put him on. That's not how it works. You can't just put someone on scholarship in the middle of a season. So Ryan Barker is going to pay for classes for at least the next 2 months. Let's help him out. So you can check that out. It's all over all of my socials at Landon Tengwall. Help out Ryan, man. Really cool story and a great kid. And you will get to hear from him soon. We are working on the official date of the interview. Should be out well before Wisconsin, but there's just some logistics we're working out. But that will be coming within the next week or so.
The link to Landon's YouTube channel is in the description of this podcast. It's at Behind the Wall 58. And the link to the Give Butter campaign for Ryan Barker is also in the description of this podcast. It's givebutter.com/Ryan Barker. But again, it's in the description of this podcast. As always, everybody, like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. We appreciate it so much. Get at us on social media at State of State Pod. Get in our comment section on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get ad-free shows, commercial-free shows for all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire playlist of members-only shows that are commercial-free for just 99 cents a month. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. Landon, you were talking a little bit about let's talk ball, right? My heart goes out to Sander Sahadak. I understand he didn't make the trip to USC, so that's got a complicated situation for him, but Ryan Barker steps up when Penn State needed him. And looking at this USC win, there have been plenty from the national standpoint that have attempted to discredit the win. And I can understand a portion of their argument in that now this is a USC team that's lost 3 of the last 4. They were unranked going into the game against Penn State. So I can understand that. But man, like if you watched the game, you saw the talent that USC was putting out there. We know what Lincoln Riley is capable of. Miller Moss, he might not be Caleb Williams. That's fine. Not many people are even in that pantheon. But still, that was a talented USC team that is going to put things together. And more importantly to me, and Justin and I have talked about this here on State of State, the game showed to me mental fortitude for the Penn State Nittany Lions. And it's not a knock on past players or teams, but that just hasn't always been the case in games when Penn State has been down. Yeah, it's natural for any player or team to maybe be a little bit demoralized in a situation like that. Cross-country trip, all these layers. I never once saw the body language or the expression on anybody's face that Penn State had given up during that game. What did you see?
Yeah, I think we've seen that all season too, Tom. You think back, let's go back, West Virginia. You're away. Everybody's talking about how West Virginia is going to bring it to Penn State. And then you have a 2.5-hour delay. You're cramped up in a tiny locker room. You come out, you don't miss a beat. The next week, you're at home against Bowling Green. You're down 10 points to a MAC team. Nobody flinches. You come right back. Fast forward, you're against USC at USC. All you're hearing is noise if you're Drew Aller all week. If you're the team as a whole, I was aware when we played Ohio State or Michigan, the kind of what the word was on Penn State with big games and what would, regularly happen. So all of that just culminating, and Drew Aller throws a pick early, saw a little bit of frustration, but completely different. And let's think back to, say, Ohio State last year, Michigan last year. That was not the same Drew Aller that we saw against USC this past Saturday. The confidence and to keep coming back, keep willing away and will your team to a win is what we saw from Drew Aller. I'm actually about to put a breakdown out. That 4th down, that 4th and 10. I mean, it was pretty unbelievable. The pressure came up the middle. Nick Singleton was a little late getting there. And Drew Aller actually tucked the ball away. I think he was getting ready to kind of face some contact, slips away from the dude, untucks the ball, and then fires one to Julian Fleming. That type of confidence of just being able to play freely, That, part of that is Andy Kotelnicki. And Drew Aller even said that. I believe he said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, I am one of the most confident quarterbacks in college football, and that is because of Andy Kotelnicki. He said that last week, and it's, you see it in the team. They're having fun out there. One thing that I would not take for granted, the celebrations. And the guys have celebrated this year. That didn't happen before. And I think little things like that can go over someone's head a little bit, but it's like, when you're a team having fun and you're playing inspired, especially through your play caller, you're going to succeed more. And I have to give a shout out against, I think it was Kent State, a bunch of the boys, Julian Fleming, Liam Clifford, Tyler Warren. They did a little beer chug celebration where they smashed the can over their head and and then chugged the beer. I said to throw that out there. But I mean, no, all that really does mean something. That is all, and we saw that all come together against USC. And as you mentioned, in years past, last year's team, if we're down by 14 away against at USC, there's not a world where we come back. I'm sorry. I just don't think there is. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't feel too worried when it was going on. I was like, okay, I think we're going to get back into this thing. We were going to right this ship. And I think the cool part about it too is USC put an emphasis on Penn State's run game. Nick Singleton was kind of limited. And you saw kind of what the impact of that was with UCLA when Nick not playing. Obviously, the run game took a big hit, didn't even get 200 yards rushing against UCLA. Come back, and USC is, they're watching Penn State's previous games, and they're saying, okay, what have they done? Illinois, their biggest game, they went 240 on the ground. We're not going to let them do that. And they came out and they said, all right, we're going to put an emphasis on the run. Drew Aller, you're going to have to beat us. Drew Aller responds with a career day, 391. What else can you ask for? And leading that drive down the field when it was 27-20, 5-6 minutes left in the game. I mean, just the stone cold killer is what Drew Aller looked like up to this point. And I said this on my podcast, Tom. I love Drew. He has so much talent, the intangibles, he has it all. One word that has not been used to describe Drew Aller up to this point is clutch. I don't think anybody has used that. You can start to use that right now. I mean, we got a little more of the season to go, but that is the first game where it was like, yo, Drew Aller came through in the clutch. He seems like kind of a dude right now. And it was just, I think for Penn State fans, we saw Drew Aller take that next step. And then after the game, I mean, very emotional. And I think he felt a huge weight lifted off his shoulders because when you're a player, you're aware of the narrative around you that, Drew didn't really, Illinois' pass defense was elite, but didn't really show up in Illinois and didn't show up in Ohio State or Michigan last year, but now comes through when the team needs it most against so far their biggest opponent of the year. I'm excited where Drew Aller in this offense is sitting heading into the bye week, Tom.
I remember right after you retired, you had come on the show and you were speaking glowingly of Drew Aller. And this was really before we started to really understand who he was, what he was capable of on the field. And you expressed infinite belief in him. And you're absolutely right in that up until this point, he has not shown that he can be clutch. He showed that against USC, but now it's proving it over and over again. To my eyes, and I want to know what you feel about this, is that I've seen the way that this offense is played for the bulk of this season. It's been balanced, complementary football, and that's every phase of the game, but especially offensively, that for most of the season, you saw over 200 yards passing, over 200 yards rushing, very balanced. And then in the USC game, it's like, yeah, you try to take away one thing, but you can't take away everything. And that's been the beauty of this offense under Andy Kotelnicki, and especially for Drew Aller. It's now that situation where I just don't feel like, as a fan and as a broadcaster and someone who's followed the game, this offense doesn't need Drew to throw the ball 40 times a game. I think people are expecting video game numbers from him for some reason. I said before going into USC, if Penn State ran the ball well against USC, Drew could have thrown the ball 15 times and it'd been like, cool, we're getting out of there with the win. So who gives a damn how many attempts he has? I know fans get hung up on that, but what do you think when you watch the team?
I think when you have a balanced offense, you're living in the best world possible when you are able to rely on both sides. And like you said, we've seen that from Penn State. Most games balanced. Illinois, we relied on the run game because they were great against the pass. Up to that point in the game, I don't know where they are now, but up to the Penn State game, I think at that point they played 5 games. They only let one quarterback throw for under 150 yards. So 5 games and only one person going over 150. That's a damn good pass defense. So, Penn State said, hey, we're going to run the ball. And we were able to run the ball at will and win the game off of our run game. Now enter USC. We can't run the ball. We're going to win the game off of our passing. To be able to be balanced, but then when one team tries to take away one thing and you're able to go to the other part of the offense, that's really hard to defend. And then you add into the mix, you got a guy like Tyler Warren who can do it all. He's taking snaps. He's throwing the ball.
Literally everything.
He's running, snapping his own. I said he's taking snaps. He is taking snaps from the center, and then
He's
also
doing everything. It's
also
insane.
becoming the center as well. So yeah, there's a reason why we call him Psycho T, because off the field, he is the most normal, nicest guy ever. And then on the field, just a complete maniac, not only in every facet of the game, but I think something that really is not talked about enough with him is that I think he is one of the better blocking tight ends I've ever seen. And he does it with just compassion. Like, he wants to bury someone in the ground. And I actually got the chance to sit down with Tyler after his Bowling Green game, after he set his first record of the season. Now we're on to new records. And he basically said, I said, how is that different when you go from essentially being an offensive lineman to being a wide receiver? I mean, that's what a tight end is. You're blocking as an offensive lineman, and then the next play, you're essentially a wideout. And he said, hey, I take my offensive lineman mindset out when I'm catching a ball. And you saw that. I'm actually looking at it right now, the highlight of just going up, climbing over number 8, and picking it off his head for a touchdown. That really just kind of epitomizes Tyler Warren and who he is. So that is also one of the reasons why I think this offense is excelling so much. And thank God he came back, Tom, for another year. I don't know where we're sitting right now if Tyler decided to leave. And I'm sure he is very happy about it, because he might just be playing himself into a round 1 grade for him going into the offseason too.
I completely agree with that. And the beauty is that Penn State has such depth at tight end. I believe in Khalil Dinkins. Luke Reynolds has already burned his red shirt. Andrew Rappelier, when you get him back. Joey Schlaffer is somebody who's shown a lot of ability. Like, it's just stupid, the talent at that position individually. I have to get your opinion on the offensive line so far this year, because there have been plenty of seasons. I've been following this team since I was a kid, and there's always been offensive lines that were stout and committed to running the ball. And then especially under James Franklin, you'd see 1 or 2 guys that really stood out and either were a high draft pick or something like that. But it was, okay, when is the unit going to really step up? And it feels like a lot of the questions we've had at tackle have maybe not been completely answered, but people feel better about what's going on in pass protection. The interior of this offensive line is monstrous. Like, it's really impressive to watch. And that was where you made your living once upon a time. How do you feel about the offensive line?
I'm ecstatic, and I couldn't be more happy for Coach Troutwine, for Nick Dawkins, for the guys in that room. Because I will tell you this, when I came in January of 2021, that was not necessarily a good room to be in. It was a room that I think the point, when anytime Penn State lost the game, the finger went right to the offensive line. It was pointed right at them. Hey, you're the reason. And I actually told this story. I had Anthony Donka on, and I was telling him this story. I said, dude, I'll never forget 2020 against Maryland after we lost. Sorry to bring that memory back up. And Trout called me, and he said, look, I'm going to fix it. He didn't give any other excuse. He didn't say this. He didn't say that. He said, we're going to get it fixed, and I want you to trust that I'm going to get this done. Here we sit about 4 years later, and I think the offensive line is the strongest group of this team, which is pretty impressive considering, maybe outside the tight ends. I got to give that. I have to give that over to them. But just what they have done from a standpoint of protecting Drew to also dominating in the run game. And I think an offensive line that is coming into this year, there was a couple question marks, especially it felt like we got into a couple weeks away from West Virginia, and they were like, oh, yeah, we don't have Caden Wallace or Olu Fashion anymore. Like, that's gone. And it's like, oh, wait, that's a thing? Because that's what if, like, no one talked about it all offseason.
Right.
And I was trying to say, guys, like, I was trying to set the scene, like, hey, give the offensive line just a little bit of time. They're going to have to gel, because that is the only position in all of sports where 5 guys have to move as one. You talk about those big runs that break off that Nick Singleton does. Those only happen when all 5 guys do their job and they also win their one-on-one battle, essentially. So it is very difficult to be a good offensive line, especially when everybody's kind of new playing together. They have done a fantastic job. You have to give, tip your cap to Philip Troutwine for building depth too. And then also getting some elite recruits. I mean, Cooper Cousins, we have not seen a young offensive lineman play this much in a long time. And there's a reason. It's so physical, the transition from high school to college. You're going against 15, 16-year-olds, And now, especially with this day and age, you might find yourself up against a 24-year-old man in college football. So normally you don't see freshman linemen playing. Cooper Cousin is pretty much that sixth guy, all in the interior. I think if anybody goes down, left guard, center, right guard, Cooper's in. So to see that, you got an old head in Sal Wormley, Nick Dawkins coming in. I think that was really important too, is to have that leader, Nick Dawkins, because I didn't mention Hunter Norzad losing a 60-year center who was just a straight up veteran. And he acted like an NFL vet in a college locker room. That hurts too, but you plug in a fifth-year guy who is Penn State. Nick Dawkins is Penn State all through and through. And now he is essentially the leader of the team and the offensive line. You're living in a great world. And then just talking about their play, Venga Ioane, we've seen him just decimate 98 from UCLA, that poor guy.
Okay,
but
I have a question for you about Vega. I don't mean to interrupt you. Do you think we're going to see Andy Kotelnicki give Vega Ioane a carry?
I think it's possible. I think the Maryland game. I'm calling my shot right now. I think the Maryland game, they'll go for it. Especially if we're up, which we should be. Maryland just got blown out by Northwestern. So I'll call my shot, because he has mentioned that Venga's calling for the ball. And, I know Venga is. Yeah, this was fun, actually. I remember Venga told me we were at in the summertime, and there was all this talk about Kansas because Andy Kotelnicki did the motion, putting one of his big guards in the slot and motion them down. And I remember seeing Venga in the summer, and he told me, he was like, "Yeah, we put it in, and it's me." And I'm like, "Yes, let's go." I was waiting patiently for this to come, and I saw it. I was like, "Oh, yes." And then finally, he did what we were all waiting for, just decimate another human. But put that aside of him absolutely drilling a man into the center of the earth. Venga Ioane himself has been playing fantastic ball.
Yes.
He is a people mover up front, and then he has been locked down in pass pro. So I love seeing that. Like I said, Nick Dawkins has been great. Sal Wormley, 60-year-old man of the offensive line, doing his thing. But both tackles was where a big question mark was. And I thought they've been really impressive up to this point. Drew Shelton has been really, really good for Drew Aller's blind side. And then Anthony Donka is someone that came in the Peach Bowl, got to play a little more than half of it, excelled. I think Caden Wallace started it, and then no one noticed that Caden Wallace didn't play the rest of the game. When you're filling in for a fifth-year right tackle as a true freshman, and no one notices, you did a good job, Tom. You best believe that, because offensive linemen, they are just like the air conditioner. You are only noticed when you ain't working anymore. So as a whole, just seeing them come together, it is very exciting. And kind of just going back to what I was originally talking about, from where we are today to where we were, at least when I first got here, it is, I'm definitely prideful of being a part of that room and being a piece of making it into something great. And got to give credit to also, outside of Trout, Juice Scruggs, Nick Dawkins, Olu Fashanu. We made it a special room, and I hope it continues to be that.
This episode of State of State is presented in part by Melon. Now, for those of you who've been watching this podcast for quite some time, you know that Justin and I are both big hat guys. Now, when I was introduced to Melon, I immediately saw how durable and comfortable their hats are. Great color options, great sizing options as well. For me, someone who likes to go to a lot of different football games and tailgates throughout the year, I need a hat that's going to be flexible depending on the weather. If it's hot out, I want something that's breathable, and that's something that Melon hats provide. And also, if it's inclement weather that's going to be nasty out, then I need a hat that's not going to lose its shape if you get them wet. In fact, if you need to wash a Melon hat, they come right back to life and they look brand new if you throw them in the wash. So that's something I absolutely love. So if you're looking for a hat as tough as you, check out Melon. You won't wear anything else after you get one for yourself. If you're looking for the world's most durable hat, look no further. Go to melon.com. That's MELIN.com and put it to the test yourself. This podcast is brought to you in part by Cherry Bundy. Cherry Bundy is a recovery product that's in the locker room for the Penn State Nittany Lions football program, and we are so proud to have them as a sponsor to get the message out there to help you with your fitness, your performance, and your recovery. Tart cherries are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. They're a natural anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits such as reduced soreness, increased recovery, contains naturally occurring melatonin to help improve your sleep and also help support your immunity. Cherry Bundy is used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, including Penn State. That's 66 out of 67 Power Four conference football teams, plus every NCAA football and basketball national champion since 2007. Goes deeper than that. In the National Football League, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions have used Cherry Bundy. Every team playing in Europe or Brazil this season had Cherry Bundy with them. You can check out Cherry Bundy right now at cherrybundy.com or Amazon. It seems to be that way. It feels like it's 8 to 10 guys deep at some times. You know, we've seen a few guys come out of games, bumps and bruises here and there, and it's just that next man up mentality. It's beyond the starting five, which is really, really impressive. Taking a look at the Saturday slate of games within the Big Ten, because this will be something Penn State's paying attention to this weekend. Nebraska's at Indiana. I can't wait to see how that game goes down. Wisconsin at Northwestern, UCLA at Rutgers, Michigan at Illinois. That's another critical one. USC at Maryland, Iowa at Michigan State. Oregon was at Purdue last night. We're recording this earlier on this week, so I'm not sure of what the outcome of that game was. But still, it feels like maybe four to six teams that could credibly be in the hunt for the Big Ten title game. And I'm looking at Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State. I think you have to throw Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana in there. And I don't want to rule out Michigan necessarily, because they know exactly who they are and what they do well. They do better than just about everybody in the country in terms of playing physical football, running the ball well, and playing really good defense. So it feels like 6 to 7 teams could still be in the hunt for that Big Ten title game. How do you feel about that? What pairing do you think we see ultimately in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we sit right now, it's Ohio State, Penn State, November 2nd. That's what it's going to come down to who's playing Oregon. That's how I see it. It was actually, for Penn State fans, I think we were actually kind of rooting for Ohio State. Technically, I know that is well against everything we believe in, but because we play Ohio State, we would have rather have them won. But, you know, especially because they did not win, it seems like nobody's going to beat Oregon. They do have Michigan. So, I mean, there's a possibility where Oregon get punched in the mouth. But for the most part, even if Oregon loses one, they still have the tiebreaker over Ohio State. It seems like Oregon's pretty much a lock. They can still lose one and still pretty much get in to the Big Ten championship. It's going to come down to Penn State, Ohio State. Who wins this game in, I guess, 2 weeks, pretty much, a little over 2 weeks. And I'm curious to see, I mean, what are we going to get from Penn State? Ohio State, they're going to bring everything. They're going to be fighting for their life. I think if you're Ohio State and you lose to Oregon and Penn State, you're obviously not in the Big Ten championship. I think you are still in the playoffs. 2 losses that would mean that Oregon is probably still number 1, 2, and then we're a top 5, either top 3. So if you lose to 2 top 3 teams, you're not getting kicked out of the playoffs. But this is Ohio State's chance to be in the Big Ten championship. If they lose this game to us, they are out. So we better bring everything we got. I don't really see any other, Indiana. Obviously, there is a world technically. Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State, none of us play each other. All of us are undefeated. So there's a small world where we have 3 undefeated Big Ten teams. I would love to see what would happen with that, but I don't think that. I think that'll get sorted out. I believe Indiana still has Ohio State and Michigan to go. And as you mentioned, Nebraska, a couple other teams. So I think Indiana will probably get knocked down a little bit. But yeah, there is a couple contenders. I'm not too worried about Illinois, and I just don't think you're right. Michigan does what they do incredibly well, but I think when it gets to a point where you really can't pass the ball, it starts to get hard. But like you said, we thought that against USC, and they did their thing. But I don't see Michigan as a true credible threat. I really just do think it is the big 3: Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and it's going to come down to who gets to face Oregon in the Big Ten championship. That's going to be decided here in Happy Valley in about 2 weeks. And it's put up or shut up, man. USC was a big game. And I think, with them being 3-2 at the time, now 3-3, and they were unranked. They fell from, I think, 11 to unranked. And it was like, okay, it doesn't mean as much necessarily. This isn't a big, it was a big win, but this isn't a signature win for James Franklin. But I think some might call it that, especially at USC. But the real game this year is in 2 weeks, Ohio State. It's, obviously we haven't, Tom, I say it all the time. I'm tired of walking around when I was playing in the facility and I would watch a highlight of Marcus Allen. I'm like, dude, Marcus Allen is like 2 years, 3 years removed from even playing in the league. Forget college. So I'm tired of seeing a highlight from 2016 when I was in 8th grade. I mean, it's time to put that highlight to bed for a little bit. Let's make some new Ohio State highlights and take them down. That's how it feels from a former player. I'm just tired of losing to Ohio State. I think this is the year we take them, man. And not to get too far ahead, Tom, I'm a little bit worried about where we are next year, especially with the defense, with how many guys are going to leave.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
We don't talk about that right now, but what I'm saying is this year is Penn State's year. If the guys leave that we think could leave, we could lose a lot of talent heading into next year, but let's not worry about that right now. Let's stay where we're at. And saying all that to say, I think this is kind of the year for us, Tom.
Let's enjoy the moment as much as we can. Listen, as someone who's an alum, a fan, and a broadcaster, I continuously think back to the loss to Ohio State in 2018 at home of the late, great Dwayne Haskins leaving that second half comeback against Penn State. And James Franklin immediately after said he was going to, quote, make everybody very uncomfortable in the building. And we've been a good football program. We can be a great football program. We're not an elite football program. I quoted that in the very first episode of this podcast platform, and that lives in my brain. So it's not holding that against James Franklin. It's just, okay, this was said now 6 years ago. This is a prime opportunity to change the narrative. However, you just said not looking ahead. How do you compartmentalize? Because this week you'll be at Wisconsin in a night game in Camp Randall. Like, that's nothing to look past. I know this Wisconsin team is not as good as they've been in the past, but you've inevitably been in these situations, these quote unquote trap games. How do you compartmentalize? Because you have Ohio State on November 2nd at home. And then, oh, by the way, kind of an unpredictable Washington team on November 9th and the official whiteout.
Yeah, I mean, obviously going into Wisconsin, it has trap game just written all over it, from coming off of an emotional win against USC. Then you get a bye week and kind of relax. And then, as you mentioned, Camp Randall at 7 p.m. at night is not an easy environment to go into. And it's going to be, I mean, Wisconsin has been good recently too. And I think one thing to talk about is that so many people in their mind, they're like, hey, be careful, Wisconsin, especially they can come in and they're going to ground and pound and run 2 tight ends, 1 running back. That's not how Wisconsin is anymore. Completely changed everything around at Wisconsin. They are more like USC's offense than they are even, let's say, a Michigan offense. They are very different. So it's going to be a completely different identity that we are playing with this Wisconsin team. So it's going to be different. I'm excited to see how the team kind of takes form the rest of this season. Like you said, we are into kind of the gauntlet stretch here on the back half of this season, and how we answer these next 2 to 3 weeks, I think, is going to be pretty significant. Now, talking about the Washington whiteout too, obviously, I think a lot of fans wish that we would have picked Illinois. I think hindsight is 2020. Obviously, we didn't know that Illinois, and I think
we did one anyway. Like
we did do one. And plus, if we picked Illinois as the whiteout in July, like, I think fans would have been mad. They're like, Illinois, like what? So no one could have predicted where teams were going to be, who was going to be undefeated. You can't do that. But I will say the one good thing about Washington being kind of a sneaky team is that since it's the whiteout and the official whiteout, I think we're going to come ready, and that is a tough environment to come across the country and play in. So I'm feeling comfortable about that. And then back in, I mean, Purdue, I think, is one of the worst teams in all of college football right now. I will say Minnesota, I think at Minnesota could also be a little bit of a sneaky game. That's like towards the end of the schedule. No one has really looked at that.
They got USC.
And that is a team. Now, that's a team that will come in and run the ball and put out 6 offensive linemen with a couple extra tight ends and try to run it down your throat. So that is going to be a little bit of a tough game as well, I think. But where Penn State sits right now is one of the best situations I think we've been in a long time. I think even if you lose to Ohio State and you don't drop anything else, you're not playing in the Big Ten championship, but you're probably 6, 7 seed, somewhere around there, if you just lose to Ohio State and that's it. And, you head to the playoffs, and people have talked about this. Being a 5, 6, 7, or 8 seed it's not a bad place to be in. I'm going to be honest. Obviously not getting the first round bye, that'd be nice, but it's hosting someone, a home Beaver Stadium game in the playoffs.
So sick.
I mean, if that happens, I feel like we're going to see a third Penn State whiteout. That'd be pretty.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you have to call for a whiteout if we have a home Penn State game, and especially it would be very likely we'd probably play an opponent that we don't see as often too. So that would kind of even add to the excitement even more. But it's always fun to look ahead and kind of talk about all that. But I think the reason that we will stay focused is, and I've talked about this on my Twitter, Coach Franklin's 1-0 mentality. I think it kind of gets a little annoying to the fans, and it's like, okay, we get it, 1-0, and he does, his tweet the Sunday night before the game week. But I will promise you, I mean, that's a real thing, and that is something that he drills into our heads. And after a while, you kind of start to believe it. And it's like when guys are talking about this, oh, when we go do this in 2 weeks, and other guys in the locker room say, hey, we're not worried about that. Like, let's lock in on today. Like, it starts to get infectious. And when you have the leaders in the locker room, kind of echoing what everything is being said from the top down, everybody starts to buy in. And I think people on the team are seeing, hey, we have an opportunity to do something really special here and be one of those Penn State teams that is remembered. What are we going to do with it? And I think Franklin realizes the talent he has, the play calling he has. And yeah, thank God for Andy Kotelnicki, Tom. I don't have any other way to say it. He's one of the most fun offensive coordinators I have seen. I might even watch more tape now than I did when I played, which is kind of amazing somehow. And I love, like, I'll just sit there and like my girlfriend will be next to me who doesn't really, I mean, she knows football, but doesn't know X's and O's. And I'm like, yo, look at this. Cause I'm like, I have to just show someone when I'm watching tape of like how cool this is. I'm like, dude, look what he did. He used the wide receiver pre-snap motion to influence the linebacker. And she's like, okay, I don't care. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Exactly. So I think there has been some new life injected into Penn State, courtesy of Kotelnicki. And through that, a confident Drew Aller, which then spreads around the entire team. I don't think the importance of that is talked about enough. When your leader, who is Drew Aller, has confidence and you see him balling out and everybody's like, okay, looking at him, all right, this guy's got a little swagger, all right, he's doing his thing. That makes you as a player want to get behind that and wants you to do more. And, if you're an offensive lineman, I want to protect Drew even more, that type of thing. So if I'm a defender, I want to get Drew the ball back. I mean, it all plays off of each other. So I think Penn State is hitting their stride just at the right moment. And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, Penn State is now battle tested. And I think that's the biggest thing going into Ohio State. You're going to get punched in the mouth. You might even get punched in the mouth against Wisconsin, but we have seen this team responds well to that type of thing.
First things first, at Wisconsin on the 26th, then you can worry about Ohio State. First things first. Landon, thank you so much for coming on. I think the world of everything that you've accomplished thus far and what you will accomplish. Check him out on YouTube and his podcast, Behind the Wall. On YouTube, it's at Behind the Wall 58. And you can also make Ryan Barker's life even better than it already is. Go to givebutter.com/Ryan Barker if you want to donate to his official NIL fundraiser created by Landon Tengwall. Look out for Ryan Barker to be on a future episode of Behind the Wall. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications for us here on State of State. As always, check us out on social media at State of State Pod. Get in our comment section on YouTube. And don't forget, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month, and you can get commercial-free, ad-free shows for all upcoming episodes of State of State. Just 99 cents a month, no commercials. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. Landon Tengwall, his information is in the description of this podcast. The fundraiser for Ryan Barker is in the description of this podcast. Penn State fans are so kind to their football players. So thank you all for being kind to us. Landon, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.